I want you to imagine a specific kind of artist. Imagine someone who builds this beautiful, just pristine house. They spend years perfecting every detail, the architecture, the lighting, the furniture.
Okay.
And then, the moment it's finished, they invite everyone over, hand out sledgehammers, and say, okay, let's smash it to pieces just to see what the rubble looks like.
That is a pretty destructive image.
It is, but it feels so appropriate for the man we are talking about today. We are diving into the life and mind of Jun'ichirō Tanizaki. And if you think you know Japanese literature, if you're picturing, quiet tea ceremonies and cherry blossoms falling gently on the water, you really need to buckle up.
Yeah, that's not what we're getting here.
Not at all, because Tanizaki is the guy who brings the spiders, the foot fetishes, and the psychological warfare to the tea ceremony.
He absolutely disrupts the tranquility. I mean, Tanizaki is a figure of massive contradictions. He's a paradox wrapped in a kimono, sitting in a Western-style chair. It's a lot to unpack.
A paradox is a good word for it.
It really is. Because on one side, you have this writer who is just completely obsessed with the shocking. And we're talking about destructive, erotic obsessions, sadomasochism, and stories where beauty isn't just pretty. It's this demonic force that completely ruins men's lives.
Which sounds more like the plot of a pulp noir novel, honestly.
Oh, exactly. It has that gritty psychological edge.
Oh.
But then on the other side of that same coin, you have the exact same man writing these incredibly subtle high art portrayals of traditional family dynamics. He becomes the great defender of the fading beauty of old Japan.
Right. The guy writing about shadows.
The guy who writes entire treatises on the nuance of shadows and the aesthetic value of a dim room. It really feels like we're talking about two different people, but we aren't. It's all Jun'ichirō Tanizaki.
And he's not some fringe figure, right? We aren't talking about some underground cult author that only a few people have read.
Oh, far from it. He is one of the big three post-war Japanese writers, right alongside Yasunari Kawabata and Yukio Mishima. He was a literary giant, an absolute pillar. In fact, he was one of the 6 authors on the final shortlist for the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1964.
The final shortlist.
The final 6. And he might very well have won it too, had he not passed away the following year.
So we're talking high stakes, high art, and very low primal urges.
Yeah.
That's the mix we're dealing with.
That is the perfect summary.
And the mission for this deep dive, I think, is to figure out how this guy ticked. We want to understand how a man who started his career as a Western-obsessed bohemian, wearing suits, watching movies, living in a European-style house, how did he transform into the ultimate guardian of Japanese aesthetics?
And we're going to find that the answer, strangely enough, lies in trauma. Specifically, geological trauma.
Earthquakes.
The earthquakes. You absolutely cannot understand Tanizaki's brain without understanding the ground literally shaking beneath his feet.
And on top of that, we have to unpack the scandalous aspects of his personal life, including a wife swap incident that honestly makes modern celebrity gossip look, well, tame.
It's unbelievable. It sounds like something he would have written, but it actually happened.
I still can't believe that part is real, but we will get there. Let's rewind the clock first. Let's go back to the origin story.
Okay.
Jun'ichirō Tanizaki, born July 24th, 1886, Nihonbashi, Tokyo. What kind of world is he stepping into?
Well, he's born into the Meiji era, which is a time of just massive, massive change in Japan. The country is modernizing at a breakneck speed, but his immediate surroundings are very rooted in the merchant class. His family was actually doing quite well when he was born.
They were well off.
For a time, yes. His grandfather had established a printing press, and his uncle owned it. So there's this connection to ink, paper, and the written word right from the very beginning of his life.
And from what I've read in his memoir, Childhood Years, or Yushi Jidai, he wasn't exactly a scrappy street kid fighting for scraps.
Not at all. Not even close. He openly admits to having a pampered upbringing. He was the young master. He was spoiled, indulged, and very, very protected. And I think that's a crucial detail because when you are that sheltered, the outside world can seem absolutely terrifying.
A fragile bubble.
A very fragile bubble. And for Tanizaki, that terror became very real, very quickly.
The bubble burst.
It burst in 2 very distinct ways. First, financially. As he grew older, the family fortune just collapsed. It was a slow-motion train wreck. The family went from being these wealthy, respected merchants to struggling just to keep up appearances.
That's a classic literary trope, isn't it? The fall of the great house.
It is, and he lived it firsthand. It got bad enough that he had to move out of his family home and live in another household as a tutor just to get by.
Wow.
Yeah. He eventually clawed his way into the prestigious Tokyo Imperial University in 1908 in the literature department, but he had to drop out in 1911. He simply couldn't pay the tuition.
So he goes from the pampered prince to the dropout tutor. That's a massive blow to the ego for anyone, I'd imagine.
It is a huge psychological shock. But the second trauma was more visceral, and it happened much earlier. 1894, the Meiji Tokyo earthquake.
He would have been just a child then, 8 years old.
Exactly 8 years old. And his childhood home was destroyed in that quake. Now, for a child who is already a bit sensitive and pampered, this was completely cataclysmic.
I can't even imagine.
Tanizaki later attributed his lifelong pathological fear of earthquakes to this specific moment.
When you say pathological, you mean, what, he was just jumpy?
I mean, he was paralyzed by it, utterly terrified. Throughout his life, friends reported that he would freeze up at the slightest tremor. Even a truck rumbling by outside could set him off.
Okay, so that's deep-seated.
It's very deep-seated. And this fear is so important because it sets up a psychological baseline for him. The world is unstable. The ground you stand on, literally and metaphorically, can open up and swallow you at any moment. Nothing is permanent.
So we have a young man who is financially humbled, terrified of nature, and trying to make his way in the literary world without a university degree.
A pretty precarious position.
And he makes his debut in 1910 with a short story that doesn't just open the door, it really kicks the door down. The Tattooer, or Shisei.
This is the birth of what you might call Tanizaki the demon.
I read the summary of this story, and it is intense. It feels like a horror movie set up from the very first line. You have this tattoo artist, Seikichi, who is obsessed with finding the perfect skin, the perfect canvas for his art.
Right, but he's not just an artist, he's a sadist. This story makes it clear he enjoys the pain he inflicts with his needles. He's been waiting for years to find a woman with the right quality of skin and, crucially, the right spirit to bear his masterpiece.
And he finds her, a young geisha, and then it gets really dark. He drugs her, which is already a major red
A
flag.
huge red flag.
And while she's unconscious, he tattoos a giant spider on her back.
A giant black widow spider, essentially. The text is very specific. It covers her entire back. It's his magnum opus.
Now, in a normal story, or at least a more moralistic one from that era, the woman would wake up, she'd scream, cry, and be the tragic victim. But that is absolutely not what happens here.
No. And this is the core of early Tanizaki. This is the key. When she wakes up and sees the spider in the mirror, she isn't horrified. She's empowered. Yes. The story explicitly suggests that the tattoo gives her a demonic, compelling power. The pain of the needle and the image of this predator unlocks something that was dormant inside her. She actually tells the artist, "You have made me a true beauty." And then she essentially steps on him. She completely dominates him.
And he likes it.
He loves it. He becomes her first victim. He has created this perfect, beautiful monster, and all he wants is to be consumed by it.
Yeah.
And this story establishes the template for so much of Tanizaki's early work, the femme fatale. He combines eroticism with sadomasochism. He links beauty directly, inextricably, to destruction.
So for him, beauty isn't passive. It's not a flower sitting in a vase.
Yeah. No, it's a spider that eats you. It's an active, dangerous force. And it's a power dynamic. He explores this in other early stories too, like The Children, The Secret, and Devil. There is this clear, recurring obsession with the idea that men secretly desire to be destroyed by beauty. They want to be the fly in the web.
That is a pretty radical departure from the good wife, wise mother ideal that the Japanese government was promoting at the time.
It was a direct confrontational rejection of it. Tanizaki wasn't interested in moral instruction. He was interested in psychological extremes. And this rebellious streak didn't just stay in his books, it spilled out into his entire lifestyle.
Which leads us into what we can call his modern boy phase.
Exactly, the Roaring Twenties. Or the Japanese equivalent, the Taisho democracy era.
Right, so from about 1913 to 1923, Tanizaki went through this period where he was absolutely infatuated with the West.
Totally smitten.
This is the part that confuses people who only know him as the traditional aesthetics guy. Because here he is, essentially rejecting Japan.
He was. You have to understand, Japan at this time was modernizing so rapidly. There was new technology, new fashions, jazz, cafes. It was a cultural explosion. And Tanizaki just threw himself headfirst into all of it. In 1922, he makes a very significant move to Yokohama.
And Yokohama is significant because
It's a port city. It's where the ships came in. It had a huge expatriate population. It was by far the most Western city in Japan at the time.
So he's immersing himself.
Completely. Tanizaki lived in a Western-style house. He wore Western suits. He led a bohemian lifestyle. He wanted to be modern. And for him, nothing, absolutely nothing, was more modern than the cinema.
I was so surprised to learn this Tanizaki was a movie guy.
He was deeply, deeply involved in the film industry. He worked as a scriptwriter for the Taikatsu Film Studio, and he wasn't just, churning out pulp. He was a serious supporter of what was called the pure film movement.
What does pure film mean in this context?
Well, at the time, a lot of Japanese cinema was really just filmed theater. They would literally set up a camera in front of a stage play and record it. It was very static.
Ah, okay.
The pure film movement wanted to use actual cinematic techniques, close-ups, editing, visual storytelling, to create a new, distinct art form. Tanizaki wrote scripts for films like Amateur Club in 1922 and A Serpent's Lust in 1923.
A Serpent's Lust. That title fits right in with the spider tattoo, doesn't it?
It certainly does. The themes were consistent. And scholars argue that you can't fully understand his later writing style without understanding his work in film. He learned how to tell stories through images, through lighting, through the visual framing of a scene.
That makes sense.
That visual nature becomes absolutely crucial later when he starts writing his masterpiece on, of all things, shadows.
So he's living the high life in Yokohama, writing movie scripts, living in a Western house, pretending he's in Paris or London.
That's the vibe.
But we need to talk about his personal life during this time because there is some real-life drama that sounds like it was scripted for a particularly bizarre reality TV show.
The wife swap incident, or the Odawara incident, as it's sometimes called.
This is just wild. So he gets married in 1915 to a woman named Chiyo Ishikawa. They have a child, a daughter named Ayuko. But it's not a happy home.
No, by all accounts, it was a miserable marriage. Tanizaki apparently found Chiyo too traditional, too domestic. She wasn't the Spider Woman or the modern girl he was fantasizing about in his fiction. She was just a wife, and that bored him immensely.
So most people in that situation would, I don't know, get a divorce or have a discreet affair. Tanizaki does something much, much more complicated.
He does something unique with Tanizaki. He actively encouraged a relationship between his wife Chiyo and his friend, the fellow writer Haruo Satu.
Wait, he pushed them together?
He did. He essentially tried to hand her off to his friend, but then he would get cold feet or maybe jealous and pull her back. Then he'd push her away again. It was this years-long psychological torment for everyone involved, especially for Chiyo.
Why on earth would he do that? It seems so unbelievably cruel.
It was incredibly cruel, but if you look at it through the lens of his work, it makes a twisted kind of sense. He was treating the people around him like characters in his fiction. He was the puppet master, pulling the strings just to see what kind of drama would unfold.
So he was mining his own life for material?
Constantly. He even wrote plays and novels about this exact situation while it was happening, like Because I Love Her and Between Men and the Gods.
That is next level narcissism. I'm going to ruin my marriage and my friendship so I have something interesting to write about.
It's the artist as a monster, in a way.
Yeah.
But eventually this all comes to a head. In 1930, they actually released a signed public statement. All three of them, Tanizaki, Chiyo, and Satu, signed a letter that was published in the press.
They published it.
Yes, announcing that Chiyo was being transferred to Satu.
They issued a press release for a wife swap.
They did. It caused a massive scandal, as you can imagine, but it shows you where Tanizaki's head was at. He was trying to modernize everything, even the institution of marriage. He was treating life itself as one big, strange experiment.
So he's playing these dangerous, manipulative games with people's lives. He's living in a Western house that he probably thinks is the height of modern civilization. But while he's orchestrating all this personal chaos, the Earth is preparing to deliver some chaos of its own.
We've arrived at the pivot point, the great pivot of his life and career, September 1st, 1923.
The Great Kanto Earthquake.
We mentioned his childhood trauma with the 1894 quake, but the 1923 earthquake was on a scale that is hard to even comprehend. Magnitude 7.9. It didn't just shake Tokyo and Yokohama, it leveled them.
Total destruction.
Total destruction. And then came the fires. Firestorms raged for days. Over 100,000 people died. It was an apocalypse.
And Tanizaki was living right there in Yokohama in his precious Western-style house.
Yes, and his house was destroyed. It completely collapsed into a pile of rubble.
Was he home when it happened?
Fortunately, no. He was on a bus in Hakone, which is a mountainous resort area nearby, so he physically survived. But when he came back down from the mountains and saw the ruins, the psychological impact was profound.
What did he see? What was that experience like?
He saw that the modern world he had been worshiping was made of paper and glass. He saw that the Western architecture, which he thought was so solid and superior, had crumbled just as easily as the traditional Japanese structures. In fact, in many cases, it was worse. The brick buildings collapsed and crushed people. The fires consumed everything.
It must have been a terrifying validation of his childhood fear. It's like the universe telling him, see, I was right all along, the ground is the enemy.
Exactly. It confirmed his deepest paranoia. And it triggered this massive internal change. He realized that this modernity he loved was fragile. It was just the thin veneer over a volatile, dangerous landscape. So he made a decision. He ran.
He left the entire region.
He relocated from the ruins of the Tokyo area to the Kansai region, the area around Kyoto, Osaka, and Kobe.
For our listeners who might not be familiar with the cultural geography of Japan, can you explain the significance of that move? It's not just a change of scenery, is it?
No, it's a profound cultural and spiritual shift. It's like a time travel move. Tokyo was the center of politics, modernization, and the new. Kansai, and particularly Kyoto, was the historical heart of tradition. It was the old imperial capital.
So old Japan.
It was old Japan. It's where the ancient temples were. It's where the old merchant culture of Osaka thrived. By moving to Kansai, Tanizaki was physically and spiritually retreating into the past.
He's running away from the modern ruins to find something that feels permanent, something with roots.
Precisely. The earthquake didn't just break buildings, it broke his obsession with the West. Or maybe it's more accurate to say it made him realize that he couldn't just be Western, he was Japanese, living on unstable Japanese soil, and he had to reckon with that.
But it wasn't an overnight switch, right? He didn't just wake up the next day in a kimono writing haiku.
No, not at all. There was a transition period, a kind of a cultural hangover, if you will. And the key work from this time is the novel Naomi, or Chijin no Ai, which was published around 1924-25.
Naomi. This is a famous one. Some people call it the Japanese Lolita.
It shares some themes with Lolita, certainly. The plot is this tragicomic exploration of sexual obsession in class. The protagonist, Joji, is this boring, middle-aged engineer. He meets a young teenage waitress named Naomi.
And he becomes obsessed.
Utterly obsessed. But specifically, he is obsessed with making her Western.
He wants to mold her, like a Pygmalion story.
Exactly. He wants to create his perfect modern girl. He pays for her to learn English. He buys her Western clothes. He forces her to take dance lessons. His entire fantasy is to live in a Western-style house with a Western-style wife.
It sounds like Tanizaki is writing about his own recent past. He's working something out here.
He is absolutely satirizing himself.
Yeah.
Joji is the fool who worships the West without any critical thought. And Naomi, well, Naomi takes his money and his lessons, and she turns into a monster.
The spider returns.
The spider returns in a flapper dress. She completely dominates him. She cheats on him with Western men. She's cruel to him. And Joji just takes it because he is so enslaved by her modern allure.
So even though he's moving physically toward tradition, his mind is still wrestling with this destructive modern girl figure.
Exactly. Naomi is the bridge. It's him processing the failure of his Western fantasy, showing how hollow it was. But once he settles into the Kansai period for good, the deep dive into tradition really begins. From the late 1920s through the 1940s, we see the emergence of the Shadow Tanizaki.
This is the era where he writes the masterpieces that he's most remembered for.
It is. He totally immerses himself in the local culture. He becomes fascinated by the Osaka dialect, which is much softer and more musical than the standard Tokyo Japanese. He starts attending bunraku, the traditional puppet theater, and kabuki. He's like an anthropologist of his own culture.
And this leads to the novel Some Prefer Nettles, published in 1928-29.
This book is pivotal. It's almost a manifesto for his change in perspective. The story is about a Tokyo man named Kaname who is living near Osaka. He's in a loveless marriage, a recurring theme for Tanizaki, obviously, and he finds himself torn.
Torn between what?
Torn between two worlds. On one side, he has his modern, westernized life. On the other, he is increasingly drawn to his father-in-law's mistress, a very traditional woman who represents old Japan, who is obsessed with the puppet theater, who embodies this quiet, subtle beauty.
It's a literal representation of his own internal conflict, East versus West, right there on the page.
It is. It's a mirror of his own journey. And the conclusion of the book, which is very ambiguous, suggests that he is slowly, inevitably drifting toward the traditional side. He stops fighting it. He's surrendering to the Japan inside him.
And this surrender leads to an essay that I think is one of the most beautiful and, frankly, strange things ever written about aesthetics. In Praise of Shadows.
In Raison, published in 1933. If you care about design, architecture, food, or just beauty in general, you have to read this essay. It will change how you see the world.
Let's unpack it. What is his core argument? It's pretty radical.
His core thesis is that Western culture is fundamentally obsessed with light. The West wants to illuminate everything. White walls, bright electric bulbs, clarity, sterility. They want to banish the dark.
Which makes sense on a practical level. We want to be able to see things clearly.
Yeah, of course. But Tanizaki argues that traditional Japanese beauty is built on shadows. He says that the beauty of a traditional Japanese room depends entirely on the varying degrees of dimness. He talks about how gold leaf looks in a dark room.
How does it look?
Well, if you put gold leaf in a bright fluorescent lit room, it just looks gaudy, it's tacky, it's cheap. But if you put that same gold leaf in a dark room, lit by a single candle, it glows. It seems to gather the faint light and reflect it with this deep, heavy, mysterious power. He says the darkness is what gives the gold its value.
He talks about soup, too.
Yeah.
Which I absolutely love.
The lacquerware soup bowl, yes.
Yeah.
He compares it to Western white ceramic dishes. He says Western dishes are shallow and bright. You see the soup immediately, it just looks like brown liquid. There's no mystery. But with a dark lacquer bowl, you have to bring it close to your face, and you gaze down into the darkness of the soup at the bottom of the dark bowl. It retains the heat. It feels mysterious and profound. He argues the pleasure of the food itself is enhanced by the shadows it's served in.
And we absolutely cannot forget the toilet.
The famous toilet section. You can't talk about In Praise of Shadows without talking about the toilet.
He writes this beautiful, almost romantic love letter to the traditional Japanese outhouse.
He does. He contrasts the Western toilet, which is white, tiled, sterile, and clinical, a place of pure function, with the traditional wooden outhouse. He describes the outhouse as a place of spiritual repose.
Spiritual repose in an outhouse.
Yes. He talks about the dark wood, the faint light filtering through a paper screen, the smell of moss, the sound of rain falling on leaves just outside. He finds this profound meditative beauty in the most functional biological act as long as it is wrapped in shadow and nature.
It's such a complete rejection of the clean, bright, modern life he was living in Yokohama. He's basically saying that by turning on all the lights, we killed the magic.
Exactly. He's issuing a warning. He's saying that when we chase Western modernization, we are bleaching our own culture. We are losing the nuance. We are losing the shadows. And for him, the shadows were where beauty lived.
This philosophy of shadows and fading beauty culminates in what is arguably his greatest work, the Makioka Sisters.
Sasamyuki. It was written over a long period, between 1943 and 1948. The title literally translates to a light snowfall.
That is such a beautiful, gentle image.
It fits the novel perfectly. It's a massive book, over 500 pages, but nothing massive really happens in terms of action or plot. It follows 4 daughters of a wealthy, old-money Osaka merchant family.
The Makioka family.
Right. And the central tragedy of the book is all in the background. Their traditional way of life is slowly, gently slipping away. It's set in the years leading up to World War II, from 1936 to 1941.
But it's not a war novel.
Not at all. The characters aren't fighting on the front lines. They are trying to arrange marriages for the third sister, Yukiko. They are going on trips to view the cherry blossoms. They are catching fireflies. They are trying on kimonos. The drama is all in these small, everyday acts of cultural preservation.
It's about the preservation of a mood, of a feeling.
It is. It's about a world that is fading, like melting snow. And unlike his early characters who are screaming and fighting about their identity, these sisters don't have identity crises. They aren't torn between East and West. They are just trying to exist beautifully in a world that is moving on without them.
Now here is the fascinating conflict. Tanizaki was writing and trying to serialize this novel during World War II.
Yes, right in the middle of it.
And the Japanese military government, they hated it.
They absolutely despised it.
Well, I mean, on the surface, it sounds like the most Japanese thing ever written. It's about kimonos and family and tradition and cherry blossoms.
That is the supreme irony of the whole situation. But it wasn't the right kind of Japanese for the fascists in power. The military government wanted war spirit. They wanted stories about self-sacrifice, nationalism, and soldiers dying gloriously for the emperor.
And Tanizaki was giving them
what? He was giving them luxury, femininity, softness, and the decadent beauty of a past they wanted to erase. He was focusing on the unimportant lives of women.
those banned.
Effectively, yes.
Mm.
The editors of the literary magazine, Chuchiron, where it was being serialized, were called in by the military police. They were warned that this novel did not contribute to the war effort. They were told it was effeminate and individualistic.
Oh,
And when the magazine tried to continue publishing it, the government threatened to cut off their paper supplies.
they got off the paper. That is a very bureaucratic and chilling way to kill a masterpiece.
It shows that Tanizaki's version of tradition was aesthetic, not political. He wasn't a nationalist in the militaristic sense. He was an aesthete. He cared about beauty, not war. In a way, he was resisting the war simply by ignoring it and focusing on the pattern of a beautiful kimono instead.
So the war ends. The militarist Japan is defeated. Tanizaki has survived the earthquake, the personal scandals, and the government censorship. He emerges in the post-war period as a legend.
He becomes the grand old man of Japanese letters, a living treasure. He wins the prestigious Asahi Prize in 1948. He receives the Order of Culture from the Emperor in 1949. In 1964, he becomes the first Japanese writer ever elected to honorary membership in the American Academy and Institute of Arts and Letters.
So logically, this is the part of his life where he settles down, acts dignified, and writes gentle memoirs about his grandkids, the respectable elder statesman.
You would think so. That would be the logical progression. But this is Tanizaki. He did not mellow with age. In fact, in some ways, he became more biologically explicit. He became the mad old man.
This is my favorite twist in his whole story. Just when you think he's become the Shadow Man forever, the old demon from his youth comes roaring back.
The demon comes back, but he's old now and he's frail. And that's what he writes about. In the 1950s and 60s, Tanizaki starts exploring sexuality in old age, and he is unflinching about the often grotesque realities of the aging body.
He writes The Key, or Kegi, in
Yep.
1956.
Yes. And this novel shocked people all over again. It's a psychological thriller told through the diaries of a husband and wife. The husband is an aging professor who is losing his sexual vitality. He can't perform anymore.
Good.
So he comes up with this twisted plan. He arranges for his wife to commit adultery with a younger man, their daughter's fiancé.
Why? What's the end game there?
He wants to make himself pathologically jealous. He finds that the jealousy, the humiliation gives him a spark of energy. It's the only thing that can arouse him anymore. He literally feeds off his own humiliation to feel alive.
That goes right back to the voyeurism and manipulation we saw in his 20s with the wife swap. It's the same psychological mechanism.
It is. It proves that the core obsessions never left him. He just adapted them to the circumstances of his aging body. And then there is his final major work, Diary of a Mad Old Man, or Fudenrojin Nikki, published in 1961-62.
The title is pretty upfront about what you're getting into.
It is. In this one, the protagonist is a wealthy, sick old man. He suffers from all kinds of ailments, nerve pain, high blood pressure, and early in the novel, he actually suffers a major stroke.
And what causes the stroke?
An excess of sexual excitement. He gets too worked up while watching his beautiful daughter-in-law, Satsuko, perform a traditional dance.
He literally strokes out from voyeurism.
Yes. And as he is recovering, or rather as he is slowly dying, his diary records his efforts to bribe this daughter-in-law. She is a total modern girl type. She likes boxing matches, she wears Western clothes, she is Naomi all over again 40 years later.
The modern girl returns to haunt his final days.
She returns. And the old man knows he can't have her sexually, so he bribes her for small favors. He wants her to let him kiss her foot or just show him her legs. And in exchange for these little thrills, he buys her things.
What does he buy her?
This is the amazing part. He buys her Western baubles, a distinctively Western handbag, an expensive cat's eye ring, all these imported luxury accessories from Paris or New York.
Wait, really? So we've come completely full circle.
Completely, totally full circle. In his final years, the West returns to his work. But notice the difference. In his youth, the West was an ideal. It was a philosophy, a lifestyle he wanted to live. Now, at the end of his life, the West is just a fetish object. It's a shiny toy that a dying man uses to buy a fleeting moment of sensation.
That is such a cynical yet perfect ending to his thematic arc. The West starts as a religion, becomes a ruin after the earthquake, and ends up as a bribe for a foot fetish.
It's Tanizaki in a nutshell. He was cynical, but he was also deeply honest. He wrote about his own health issues directly in that book. He really did suffer from paralysis of his right hand starting in 1958. He really did have angina pectoris. He used his own physical decline as raw material for his fiction. He cannibalized his own life until the very end.
There is a tanka poem he wrote in 1963, just a couple of years before he died, that I think captures his mindset perfectly.
Yes, I know the one. This heart of mine is only one. It cannot be known by anybody but myself.
He lived a life that was so public in so many ways. The scandals, the awards, the essays. But internally, he remained a complete enigma.
He died on July 30, 1965, of a heart attack in Yugawara. He was buried at Hunnan-in Temple in Kyoto.
A very traditional temple, I assume.
A beautiful, quiet temple known for its moss and its deep shadows. A fitting resting place for the author of In Praise of Shadows.
And his legacy is completely cemented. The Tanizaki Prize was established that same year, 1965, and it's still one of the most prestigious and sought-after literary awards in Japan today.
When you look back at the whole trajectory, it's just astonishing. He starts with the spider tattoo body horror. He moves to silent film scripts and Western suits. He survives the Great Kanto Earthquake, which shatters his entire worldview. He retreats to the Kansai region to write the high art of the Makioka Sisters. And then he ends his career staring unflinchingly at the grotesque realities of elderly desire. What a ride.
It's an incredible artistic journey. So let's wrap this up. What is the so what here? Why does Tanizaki matter to us sitting here today?
I think he matters because he didn't just choose East or West. He embodied the violent, messy struggle between them. Japan in the 20th century, and really the whole world, was trying to figure out how to be modern without completely losing its soul. And Tanizaki's life and work show that it's not a clean transition. It involves pain, confusion, contradiction, and loss.
And he showed us the value of the shadows we've lost.
He taught us that tradition isn't just about museums or history books or tea ceremonies. It's about a way of seeing the world. It's about shadows, darkness, and nuance. He warned us that when we turn on the bright lights of modernity, whether that's literal electric lights or just the constant glare of the internet and global culture, we lose something profound.
We lose the mystery.
We lose the mystery. We lose the ability to see the gold leaf glowing in the dark.
That brings us to a final thought for our listeners. We talked a lot about the earthquake. Tanizaki hated earthquakes. He was terrified of them his whole life. They were his trauma. And yet, the Great Kanto Earthquake was the very thing that forced him to move to Kansai. It forced him to pivot. It arguably forced him to become the great writer he became.
It destroyed his house, but it built his legacy. A terrible paradox.
Exactly. So here is a provocative question for you, the listener, to think about. Is destruction sometimes necessary for true reinvention? Can we only truly value our culture or even our own lives once we've seen the ruins of what we thought we wanted?
It's a terrifying thought, but perhaps a necessary one. Sometimes the ground has to shake before we can find our footing.
Something to mull over. That's it for this deep dive into the shadows and spiders of Jun'ichirō Tanizaki. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.